So, like Katarina already introduced, my topic today to talk to you about is metadata. And as we think metadata builds the basis for successful bookselling. And already in Ute's talk, I think we get a good first glance of that data might be something interesting to have a look on. So what we do today here in this talk is like having more look on the technical side. But first of all, let me introduce myself shortly or briefly. I'm a business development manager. I'm working in a business unit international in MVB, a German IT service distributor. As a business development manager for a business unit called International, clearly my main focus is based on an international business, finding new possibilities to found new companies in other countries. So that is one part of my job. The other part is like finding new innovative solutions, technical solutions to solve problems which are existing in the book market. As said, I'm working for a company called MVB. We are a sister company to Frankfurt Book Fair, so that makes Katarina and me colleagues, and we both belong to the German Publisher and Booksellers Association. So that means we are quite in an interesting position in the German-speaking market, especially in the German market, because we belong to this political organ. So our interests are usually just an interest for the whole book industry. So we belong kind of like not to any side. We are interested in strengthening overall book markets. A little bit more details about MVB itself. Like said, we are based in Germany. So we are based in a German-speaking market. That means Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. But on the other hand side, we founded businesses in the US, in Brazil, and in Mexico. Our main products are, first of all, MetaBooks, which is a books and print database. It's based on the German market. There we call it VLB, which is not the best international name because it means just in a long version Verzeichnis lieferbarer Bücher. And I know that this is quite complicated for everybody to speak, to say, or even to remember. But this is a books and print database. So this builds for us, in our opinion, the basis to start to work with metadata. So it's about storing metadata. So publishers put the information in there, and retailers, libraries, and everybody who is in the need of getting metadata can receive this information from us. On the other hand side, we have a tool which is called VLBTix. It's kind of like an add-on for the MetaBooks platform. And it's meant to be kind of like a marketing platform. So while in the earlier days, publishers have their need to advertise their new titles, which were brought, so the novelties, which were brought to a market, and they had a salesperson running around the whole country, transporting these catalogs, printed catalogs, which are heavy and which are kind of like not healthy for the environment because you use a lot of paper. And we started to digitalize that with a platform called VBTix. So with that platform, you can create these catalogs online in a digital way. You can marketing different single titles, and you can show off your novelties to the people who are interested in these. So mostly retailers. At last, we have a product called PubNet. PubNet is an order clearing tool. It's meant to make it easier to have the order, to make the ordering process much easier between the booksellers and the publishers. But let's get to the topic of that talk. And the topic is metadata, as said. But what is metadata, first of all? And to get a first glance of that, I want to start with a small example. So in this example, it's about that a friend of you is coming towards you and he's telling you, I've read a beautiful book and it's called Pedro Paramo from Juan Rulfo. And he tells you a little bit something about the content. But the problem is all you can remember in the end is just the name Rulfo. You know that this book is about a landowner, and you remember that it's from 1955. So you have the issue that you don't really remember which book was meant to be, but you still like to read that. And the good thing is, because of metadata, you can just go through a common search engine, type in your ideas or the words you remember, in this case, Rulfo landowner in 1955, and you get search results which are leading exactly to the book you are searching for. And that is just possible because of metadata, because there is information stored in the search engines. There's information stored on websites. So let's get to a first definition of metadata. This one is from Bill Casford, founder and member of the Publishing Technology Partners. He stated it like, in the context of publishing, the easiest way to think of metadata is this. It's not the content, it's information about the content. So that means we are not speaking about the content, we are creating information. For a book, it means we have a book, which is the content, and the information around the book makes it the information about the content. So this is the metadata. But before we dive deeper, let me point out some struggles or how the book industry might look like without metadata, to point out a little bit why it is interesting to have, or why it should be interesting to have a closer look to this topic. So from the perspective of the publisher, it's like the publisher likes to announce their titles not only to the audience, to the end customer, they like to announce their titles to bookstores. So they need to inform them. Like said already earlier, it's like usually you have a salesperson around in the country and pushing catalogs with their cars to the bookstores, making many talks. But especially in these times of a pandemic, it's not quite that easy to do so. So you like to transport this information on another way. But in the end, the main problem is to inform bookstores, and there are many, and all should be informed about which books you are announcing to a market or which ones you are likely to sell. Beside this, beside the perspective of the publisher, there is the perspective of the bookstores. Bookstores, in the end, like to know which titles are available from the publishers. So they are on the other hand side. So they need to know which catalog is available in your country, which titles are available, which ones are published new. So even they need quite a bunch of information about what is available in the market. And bookstores, in the end, like to sell these titles to the end customer. And the customers is the question, where are they, who they are? And customers themselves are buying books in many different ways today. So it's for mostly they can go to bookstores, so they can buy in physical stores, but at the same time, the opportunities to buy books in web shops or online in total is getting more and more. And this is not only about books, we have ebooks, we have printed books, we have audiobooks, so we even have there quite a bunch of different types of media. And that makes it even more complicated. And a really big problem is the discoverability. So the reader in the end has a problem to find the right book he might like to read. So in the German-speaking market, there are at the moment 2.5 million active titles. And to find the right book as a person, it's quite complicated because everybody has their own taste. And that means you're searching for books. So the question is how publishers can provide the right information to inform retailers, first of all, which books should be bought. So retailers can inform the reader which books they have in stock and to give them better advice which book might fit to the customer. But to understand that a little bit better, let's have a look how the decision of a reader is made to find the right book and when he's likely to buy. Therefore, let's have a look on this graphic on the slide. So everything starts with searching. So somebody likes to buy a book, and most often people don't know exactly what they like to buy. So if they have a brief idea, they can use a quick search. So mostly if you're in web shops, you go just to a quick search bar on the top, like it's just standard today, and you type in words. The question is which kinds of words. So mostly we are using in these case keywords. I will come back to the topic a little bit later. On the other hand side, searching often works through recommendations. So we trust friends which might have the same taste, or we go to the bookstore and ask for a book which might be fitting for our taste. So we get these recommendations. But at the same time, there are reviews, like Uta has shown us, they are working a lot with bloggers. So bloggers give recommendations as well. So this is the marketing of influencers. And in the end, we are likely to browse to get kind of like just discover new things we have not seen so far. So there are a lot of different ways to search for a title. The question is how we find what we are searching for. So if you type in a search in a quick, if you are using search engines, you will be led to using hit lists. So you get just a bunch of hit lists. So you have quite compressed information, like there's just the cover of the title, there is the title named, and not much more. So the reader will find the book most basically just by the cover. There are selections, like Blogger makes selections, or there are top sellers which are shown based on marketing data. There are rankings like these bestseller lists. There are product presentations. These can be given on the website, even on the website of the publisher himself. And often the pricing plays a big role. But in the end, the buying decision is made on 3 simple criteria. First of all, it's the presentation. That makes the cover so important of a title, because that's the first thing we see, and this is the visible interaction with the customer. Then there's the description. So in comparison to audio or movie, it's quite complicated to get an introduction of a book. It's not like you can just click into the title of an audio file and you listen a little bit to the music and you can see, is it fitting basically to your taste or not? It's much harder to get an idea. Is fitting to what you like to read. So you need kind of like a brief description to get an idea what this book is about. And then there's additional product information. Again, a little bit more about that in a second. So let's get to another idea what metadata might be with a second definition. This time given by Amanda Guglia. She's marketing manager and consultant for developing businesses for the Spanish book industry. She stated that, I imagine metadata is if it were bookshelves in a bookstore. The more metadata you include, the more bookshelves you're using to exhibit your books. And exactly this is a good example of a practical way how metadata can work. Because it's like, if you go to a bookstore, you have different bookshelves. If they are completely unorganized, you will not be able to find anything. And there are different criteria. I know some people who organize their bookshelves by color. That is nice looking, so for your home, a good idea. But for a bookstore, it might be not the best idea, because the reader will not find what he's looking for. The criteria of the color of a book might not be fitting perfectly for your taste, as long as you're not searching for books which are just making your home colorful. So if you want to read them, maybe you have different other criteria. So with this definition, we can get a little bit closer to the question what metadata is. And therefore, I want to walk through I like to do a journey through the woods of metadata with you. So think of metadata like these trees. So you have kind of like a wood, a huge forest with a lot of trees, and a lot of different types of metadata are growing there. And there are different types, as said. So what we have is, like, for example, we have statistics. So we have sales data. So we know which are the best sellers in the market. So we can even use algorithms to find out if a book might be a bestseller. AI is getting more and more a topic, and as far as I know, we will learn a little bit more about AI today as well. And then, besides statistics, there's information about the reader. Also, something pointed out by Ute already in her previous talk. So, reader can be analyzed by, for example, gender, age, but the reader himself can give information as well, like writing reviews or giving ratings for titles. And then beside that, we have market data. So you can get information from the publisher and about the publisher. We know about something about clearing, so is there stock information, and we know the sales data. Beside that, we have information from the bookseller themselves. So booksellers can give suggestions, they can write critics. They are, for them, it's necessary and important to have stock information. But in the end, there's one tree in the middle, which is a little bit bigger. And that is for us the idea or the basis of what metadata makes. And this is the core info. The core info of metadata is directly related to the title, while what you can see, and this is the biggest difference here between the smaller trees and the big one in the middle. The smaller ones are related with the book, are not directly related. They are like information around this book, while the core information is directly related to the book. So for example, we have the price of the book, we have the cover of the book, we have the ISBN, the title and subtitle. Let's have a closer look to this core information to get a better idea of what this is. So the basic metadata is the ISBN, the title, the format, the publication date, the classification, the retail price, the sales rights, the cover image, and the contributor. These basic metadata is not invented by us. So the idea of these core metadata or basic metadata is given by Nielsen. They made a book study and they figured out which parts of metadata sets influence the sales the most. And they came to the conclusion that exactly these 9 different types of information around the book are boosting the most your sales, because this is the most basic information the readers are looking for if they're doing search in a bookstore or even online. But it's not only about this basic metadata. When it comes to that, there's a lot of more. So there's additional information. And the most important additional information, first of all, is the language, the dimension, the availability, the edition, the number of pages, the synopsis, and the keywords. But still, this is not all. There are hundreds of options. So for example, the most common used standard to transport information about books is Onyx, and there are more than 1,000 options to put in different information about a book. So we can collect already a lot of information. So this is one part. So it's about having an idea which information is necessary. The other part about metadata is about communication. So while in earlier times without digitalization, communication was most basically between a person and a person. And that is what we have the whole time while walking around in the streets or being at your work desk, you talk to people. But communication has changed in the last decades. So who's communicating with whom? Mostly machines with machines. And the communication between humans and machines differ a lot. So while humans can interpret information and even they can easily have meta communication, that means you can communicate if the content which was communicated is correct or not, and you can verify that easily. And even you can adaptations of the content as a human. Machines are a little bit not that intelligent when it comes to that. To exchange information, it must be clear, it must be standardized. So this is a huge problem, because usually if you type in, for example, an author and you do a typo, a human will be able to interpret that in the correct way. A machine will not realize this typo unless you have standardized information about this author. For example, there are databases giving unique identifiers for authors, so you can use this unique identifier, which make it standardized data about the author. But that's just the first glance on what are standards and why to use them. So let's have a closer look to this topic. So standards are, as said, most commonly and necessary to be used for machine-machine communication. And this is getting a bigger and bigger thing. The problem with standards is, like you can see on that chart, and it's on purpose that it is a little bit overloaded, because standards are overwhelming. There are a huge bunch of different standards. They all are kind of like historical grown. They are still growing. They are changed constantly. So yeah, to get a little bit along with that, it's quite complicated. But I'd like to give you a little bit better idea what you can use. So maybe you have an idea for yourself where you want to dive, or where you like to dive deeper with metadata to improve and make your business running better in the end. So let's try to separate these different standards which are named on that slide. So first of all, the ones now marked in red are the ones which are identifiers. So I guess you all have heard about ISBNs. So you have this unique identifier for book titles, and every book title just can have one unique ISBN. So there will be never, or hopefully there should be never, an ISBN which is given twice to a book. Beside that, it's kind of like working the same within DOI. It's the digital version, which is leading to a kind of like URL, and the ISNI, which is meant to be for authors. So these are the ones which are unique identifiers to identify something special. For example, the ISBN, the book, the ISNI, the author. Beside that, we have here marked now in yellow, we have different classification systems. So these are meant to be a little bit like organizing your bookshelf. BISEC, BIG, THEMA are working basically like the same. It's just they are from different eras of the book market. So BIG is the oldest, and then there was BISEC, actually quite often used, and THEMA is getting more and more the international standard, which is globally used. All have their doubts and all have their improvements. So but I think the most improved one is THEMA. These classifications, as said, are working a little bit like the bookshelves in a bookstore. So the bookshelves are organized by genres most often, and exactly that is what you can do, but you can be much more detailed. While bookstores have the issue that they are physically limited, so you cannot have as many shelves as you like, and if you are too detailed, it's quite complicated. The good thing is, in a digital way, you can be much more detailed. So this is about classifying your title, giving an idea for the user in the end, for the end customer, for the reader, which books he might read. So in Germany, we have something like we have criminal literature, and it's getting more and more regional. So it's not only about having a shelf with criminal literature, you might have a shelf with criminal literature which is meant to be for a certain region in Germany. So you can make that specific exactly with these classifications. And then there's the last type of standards. This is now given here in the color blue. And these are the standards which are meant to be for the data exchange. So Onyx, Mark 21, and Synly are all standards which are meant to be collecting the information of, for example, the standards given in yellow and in red. So they are kind of like a wrap-up which are collecting all these different other standards, collect them together, and make it possible to exchange this information. So this is like an communication protocol between a machine and a machine. So let's have a look on examples of all of these different types of standards to get a better idea how they work. This, for example, is the ISBN, so the International Standard Book Number. And like you can see here, it works in a certain way. I don't want to go too deep with that, but like you can see here, the ISBN 13 is built out of different parts to make it possible to even analyze from, for example, where this book is from. So we know the prefix 978 is just stating this is an ISBN. Then is followed by the group number, and the group number here in 607 gives me the information that this is a book title from the Mexican market, for example. Then we have a publisher number. This is the 1234 in this example. It's stating which publisher it is. So we can even see in this ISBN, we get a lot of information about where this title was published and from whom this title was published. So the ISBN is, as said, as a unique identifier meant to be like you can identify the title, but even it's transporting information. So these are the types of identifiers. Let's get to an example of how categories work. This is an example of BISEC in this case. So what we have here is like different levels. So as said, it's a little bit like organizing your shelves. So in the first level, what you have here is you can choose in very abstract way which shelf you want to choose for your book. We have here basic categories like philosophy, photography, history, or even fiction. But this is quite a little bit too unspecialized. So it's not giving you enough information about where this book should be. So let's say this is a fiction book. So on level 1, this is the red underline word. So choosing fiction gives us for level 2, a deeper level, again, some options to choose. So in this case, let's say we have a book from fiction, which is a romance with the history of love. So we can choose this, but then even we can go deeper and we can say this is about history. So on level 3, and even we can deeper and say this is from the 20th century. So what you can see here is like you can make it very, very specific. And that is what I was stating earlier. It's about guiding the user or guiding the reader in the end to the title he wants to read. And if the reader has quite a specific idea or quite a specific taste, he will definitely find the right title if you give enough information about these classifications. And as a last example, I like to show you a little bit something about Onyx. And this graphic should show a little bit what I said earlier. Like Onyx is a standard which is meant to be wrapping up. So you have these Onyx files. I'll give you an example about that in a minute, which is kind of like a technical file. It's not meant to be read by humans. It's meant to be read by machines. And it's containing all this information. Like you can see here, we have an Onyx file. And then we have included there the ISBN, the BISIC, but we have as well the publication date included, the contributor information, the price, much more language, the availability, format, dimension, and much more. As said, there are much more than 1,000 different possibilities to add information. So what it is about this Onyx standard? Onyx is the short version for online information exchange. So it carries in its name that this is about machine and machine communication. It's the primary international metadata standard for books. So it's most commonly used all over the world. It's developed and supported by Editor and released in the year 2000. So it's quite implemented and already quite used very much. And it's about streamlining the delivery of the product metadata to book supply chain partners. As said, it's about communication. The idea of Onyx is to standardize as much as possible. As said, the more you standardize, the better the machine-machine communication works. And standardization has another good opportunity, because if you are just using a code instead of a written word, let's say we want to specify the product form of a title, then it's easier to write a code than stating down this is a hardcover book, because hardcover book just works in a certain language. And to make it understandable in all languages, it's easier to use the code. Hardcover is the code BC in Onyx. So BC is in all languages all over the globe, just the same information. But this is like these codes are given in more than 200 Onyx code lists. So once again, you can be super specific already with these standards, which are already established. And then Onyx includes several different other standards and makes the data machine readable. So now I show you, and sorry because it looks really technical, an example of Onyx. Luckily, most of us are not, for us, it's not necessary to read these files. So as said, they are for machine-to-machine communication, so don't bother. You will, most of you will never get in touch of that. You might use programs just to give this information or to manage this information. And that is kind of like our business about to make it possible for everybody to handle metadata, because handling Onyx files is just nothing nice to do. But what you have here is like, you can see it's Onyx is an XML standard. So this is kind of like a standard which is already existing in the IT industry for a long while, but it's containing just all kinds of information. So in this example, you see this is the Onyx file, and a small piece of that is just showing the ISBN. So we have here specified this is the product identifier. The 15 is just stating that this is an ISBN. And in the end, we have the ISBN given. Quite easy, well, not really easy to read. And yeah, as a human, it's not comfortable to read. But let me show a different example to show you how specific you can be. If you transport price information, and this is about the price which is named from the publisher to the bookseller, so the bookseller can inform the customer how much a book should cost, then you can be specific about this information. And this might be important for you because depending on the country where you are, there are different taxations related to the book type you have. So for example, ebooks are different taxed than books in some markets, or audiobooks as well. So you need to give this taxation information. And that is exactly what you can do. You can give information about the taxation. You can give information about the price type, which is important as well, because sometimes you have common retail prices. In Germany, for example, we have fixed prices for books for a certain period. So you can name this if this is retail price or fixed price or special price. Again, you can be very specific. And that is a good thing because you don't need to give a call to every 200, for example, 200 retailers in your country and send to them an email to state, yeah, these prices I have given to you, these are retail prices and not fixed prices. You can transport easily this information already just in an Onyx file. Then a last big example about these Onyx files. This is an example for one of these Onyx code lists. In this case, it's shown list 150 for defining the product form. And then I see that I already made a mistake because earlier I said the hardcover book is BC. That was a lie. Sorry about that. The paperback book is the code BC. So clearly, if I use the code BC, I know what it is, and I'm using a tool which makes it easy for me to choose hardcover or paperback. It's transporting this information to Onyx and stated just this code. And as said, about these codes, what makes them super practical to use is that they are unique. So you cannot really make mistakes like making a typo. The code BC will always stay the code BC, not like writing an author name in different ways. It's like using these, and at the same time, they can be understood in all languages. So this was a glance on what Onyx can do. As said, it's a really mighty thing and it's really specific, but yeah, at the same time, this is the work of a metadata manager. So it makes sense if you're a bigger publishing group to invest in metadata managers who are taking care that this information is given clean. But this information needs to be transported, and this is the question of communication. So to transport the information, there are different problems. Like said, we are talking about machine-to-machine communication, but even there are some problems occurring. So first of all, you need to manage the data. Said it's like Onyx files are not very comfortable to manage, so you might like to use a tool. There's a huge bunch of different tools to make metadata management. We by ourselves is exactly what we are providing with the books and print database MetaBooks. And beside managing metadata, so as a publisher, there's the question how to communicate. And to show you briefly about how complex communication of metadata might be, just show you shortly this graphic where you can see on the top, you have the publisher who creates the metadata and then is likely to spread this information to everybody who's in need of this metadata. And so this is, for example, the data aggregators, the ebook aggregators, the wholesaler, and if you as a publisher have your own web store, you want to show this information in your own web store as well. Then the persons in the middle are pushing this information further. Sometimes they even add information to the online retailers, retail stores, and libraries to bring the information at the end to the readers. So like you can see, it's quite like a huge data flow, and it's a lot of people who need to be brought together. So in many markets still, the communication in this metadata exchange, in this whole change or life cycle of metadata is not centralized. That means that The publishers are communicating directly with all retailers, and some markets just have several hundred retailers. So as a brief example, when we entered the Brazilian market, it was like some of the publishers were handling just their metadata in Excel sheets. So they had more than 30 Excel sheets containing kind like the same information. They were just adjusted so they can send out these Excel sheets to different booksellers. So they invested a lot of time and money just to keep their metadata clean. And like you can imagine, there's a huge loss of metadata if you exchange this information from a publisher to bookseller manually by email or by sending out or typing it in manually in several platforms. So in the end, you have a huge loss of data if you don't coordinate the communication of this metadata exchange. You have outdated information because it's quite tough to keep everything up to date, especially if you need to enter the metadata in several places, several times. You might have quality problems, especially if you need to enter several times the same information. So try it out by yourself to type in the same author name 30 times in different fields in Excel sheets. I'm sure at least you will do one typo. And the time effort which is needed just to do so is really, really high. And that is creating huge costs on side of publishers, but retailers as well. So our basic idea to handle or to solve this problem is to create centralized data hubs. And that is what we already have done in Germany. We are in this business since more than 40 years. So this is the country where we started all what we are doing. And to create these centralized data hubs, the idea is to standardize first of all the data, because if you have a central source of data, everybody is using the same data and it's much easier to establish a standard. It makes it easier to communicate because everybody is accessing just one single source, and publishers just are just in the need to push information just to a single source. And it's the same data for everyone, so it makes it more equal. And this is a good thing. As said, we are interested in strengthening the whole market. So it's not only about benefiting the big ones, it's about benefiting everybody and giving them the same strength and opportunities. So how does it benefit the publishers? If we have a closer look, the publishers that just can easily manage their metadata. It's about having a tool. So that's what we offer with metadata, metabooks, but there are others as well. So if you are in another market than in Germany, Mexico, or Brazil, you might need to use a different tool. We know that there are established platforms in most bigger book selling markets. Then you can use a tool, and that makes it easy to manage your metadata. The information can be validated if you use tools for that. That means that there are checkup routines checking for if everything is fine with your information. So, for example, if you have given as a dimension of a book 2 meters, that might be too high. A digital solution can provide that. They inform you 2 meters doesn't sound like this is a dimension of a book or the width of a book. And then information, if it's stored in a centralized database, can be sent automatically to the booksellers. So you don't need to do that with different Excel files anymore, or do it manually with emails. On the side of the booksellers, it's more about receiving the information. So with having checkups and validations running in metadata management tools, it's clear that the quality of data which can be sent to booksellers is much higher. At the same time, while it's easier for the publishers to put their information, it's easier to be informed as a bookstore. That means that this information you get is more up to date, and at the same time, it's about being more complete information. And that leads to booksellers with this stack of information that it's easier to give better advice to the customers, because the bookstores or booksellers by themselves are already better informed about what is in the market and what are the titles themselves. So the publishers can suit the booksellers better to provide better information to the reader. And exactly these are the people who are in the focus. So the focus should be on the customer. So providing them with the best titles which they are likely to read. And therefore, it's interesting for the reader to have the complete list of complete list or catalog of a market. But with these huge catalogs, like Ori said earlier, if there are millions of titles in your market, it's quite hard to find the right book. You need high metadata quality as a customer to find your books if you're searching for keywords, or as said, if you're searching for categories. So if you're searching through the bookshelves, especially in an online world where you have access to everything. And the point is that if the customer finds in the end more easily the book he likes to read, he will buy more books because he's happy with what he has read. And that is what makes our idea, like that metadata leads to higher sales, even better, because it's about strengthening book markets, it's about strengthening book itself, and it's about bringing more books to customers and readers. So I hope I was able to give you quite a glance of what metadata can do, even while this was more the technical side. I hope you have enjoyed my talk so far. And thank you very much for having me here again. And now I'd like to hear if there are any questions.